Did you know that how to breathe is just as important as the act of breathing? Yes, I know that sounds crazy, but here we go. We're going to talk about breathing today because as a doctor, I feel there's only a handful of things that are so critical to make sure that you're at the tip-top shape of your health and well-being, and breathing is probably number one or number two for me. And so I'm Dr. Jill Wade. Welcome to the Beyond Face Value Show. I am here today with our lovely co-host, Laura Edward Lewis, knower of all health and wellness things.
No, I'm not. But I'm so happy to be here because I'm such a nerd and I love everything. And this is a really interesting topic that a lot of people don't think about unless they're in that mindset. Yeah. So talking about an essential aspect of what everybody does.
Truly
breathing.
Is essential. I mean, we've got our heartbeats, right? That's essential. Everybody kind of knows that. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to tell you, breathing is about number two on that list as far as I'm concerned. And again, it's so unconscious. You just breathe, right? Mm-hmm. Or so you think. But what I want to do is just want to kind of pique your interest into the thought process of how do you breathe? The actual act of what you do, if you breathe through your nose versus your mouth, and some of the benefits of doing each.
Great. Let's dive in.
I've got my notes here to remind me of a few things. So at some point, I want to do a show that's maybe my top 10 books that every household needs on health and well-being. But I'll give you a little tip. This is one of them. Okay. There is a book out there called Breath from James Nestor.
Okay.
And we have a picture of that. Get it on Audible, order it on Amazon. Every household needs this book. He is not a physician, not a doctor, but he has studied breathing so well. And he has written this amazing book that really talks in just layman terms, like terms that anybody would understand. And so I really think that book is a lot of kind of the tips and tricks that I'm going to talk to you about today. Okay. All right. As a dentist, I obviously deal with the mouth. And so we deal with breathing in the simple fact that how you breathe, even as a child and as you are developing, as a teenager, when your mouth and the shape of the mouth is forming, mm-hmm. is very dependent on how you breathe and if you're breathing correctly through your nose with your mouth shut.
Okay.
And so that is why breathing and sleeping is such an intimate relationship with dentistry. Mm-hmm. People think of dentists, they think about teeth, and they think that's all we're worried about is your teeth. Kind of drill on them and fix the teeth themselves. But there's so much more that a lot of dental offices are really starting to get into. And because we've focused many years on health and wellness as well, dental wellness is what we call it, mm-hmm. we realize that this is just a critical part or piece of helping everybody understand. We dive in a lot in our office with our snore laser, which we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. And as we've been doing and helping people more reduce the noise of their snoring and breathing at night, we have to get into this topic and start talking to people about the actual act of it.
Yes. And so we've covered before when we did talk about the snore laser, that's pretty amazing what you have there, the Solea Sleep, yes. Right? That like with sleep apnea or the way people snore, it's different for a lot of people. Like it's not cookie cutter, but if you're not breathing properly when you're sleeping and you're depriving yourself of oxygen, and this is really something to think about because what's going to happen to somebody if they're not getting that oxygen when they're breathing? They're not going to be functioning as optimally mentally, physically, right? I mean,
not at all.
This is so important.
This is crazy important.
And I'm hoping as we have this discussion, I just want to mention this because I may forget to mention it, is that under stress, for example, I know something personal about myself is that I stop breathing. I will hold my breath.
A lot of people do.
I'll hold my breath if something's stressful if I'm not thinking about it. And so someone had pointed that out to me before several years ago. And I have to think, oh, yeah, am I breathing? Do I need to go ahead? and keep the rhythm of the breath going, because wouldn't it make sense that if I stop breathing, it's going to make my stress worse?
It absolutely does.
Right?
There's no question about it. Your cortisol levels will go sky high very, very quickly. That's your stress hormone. And so, man, I mean, I hope I don't go down a rabbit trail at some point, because there's just so many different directions that we can go to talk about this. But just like you mentioned, oxygenation to the brain, the only way that you're going to do that is to breathe, correct?
Right.
And if you breathe one way versus the other, it is more helpful. So we'll talk about that here in a minute.
All right.
But how do you even know if you're not breathing very well, right? Or how do you know that you're doing it wrong? Well, you mentioned something just a few minutes ago, right before we got on air, about my ring that I have on. And the ring that I have on is called an Oura ring, Oura. And I'm telling you, it and Fitbits and different watches and things that we now have that are called wearables are so amazing. I mean, I just really feel like when this technology kind of came around, and it's just getting better and better and better, that the things that we can learn from what our wearables will tell us and track can be incredible. And so the reason why I'm going to say something about the Oura ring is because I find that at night when I'm sleeping and I have the ring on and it monitors my whole sleep pattern and everything about it, one of the major things that it actually shows me trends of is my oxygenation levels at night. So it doesn't matter just how well I sleep, but how well am I breathing and how well is my body getting oxygenated.
And so there's an app on your phone, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you're asleep and you don't need to worry about it until you wake up and you take a look at it and you go, wow, at 2:00 in the morning, my O2 level went down or something like that. Is that how it works?
Exactly. It can also track it all day long too. So just like you said, if you're in stressful environments, maybe holding your breath more, for whatever reason, exercising, maybe even, kind of breathing wrong during exercise or not enough, then that's going to pick up on the Oura ring. So these little subtle informational tidbits that you can get from these wearables is really going to highlight to you of things that you need to start to practice with. And I know that sounds strange. You're like, practice breathing. How would you practice breathing? Well, I'm going to tell you how.
Okay.
And you're going to get that book, and it's really going to dive into why it's important and how it's important. So do you remember, because you grew up in Dallas, right?
I did. I moved from upstate New York sophomore year in high school. So I always do say, yeah, I'm a Texan, so Dallas.
Awesome.
But,
So have you ever heard of the Cooper Clinic?
Yes, I have, actually. Yes, my father, after having a major heart attack at the age of 40, ended up going there and restoring his health with Dr. Kenneth Cooper, who was the founder of that.
He's an amazing man. I kind of call him the father of aerobics. He came up with the word, he coined the term. And the reason why I wanted to go there is because aerobic actually means with air. So he really, in his heyday, I think what built his whole program, I feel like, was making people understand that while you're in exercise, that you had to breathe properly in order to get enough air so that your cells were not deprived of oxygen, so that your brain was not deprived of oxygen, which actually made you have a better workout, made you have better resiliency, made you sleep better at night, yada, yada, yada. I could probably list off 50 other things. So aerobic versus anaerobic, and anaerobic means without air. So I think what happens is people either during sleep or during exercise, or maybe like you said, even stressful times during the day, can get into an anaerobic aspect of, breathing. And this is just not good for you. I mean, when somebody has an accident in a pool or has a drowning accident, I mean, the air not getting into their brain is what is really hurting them. Okay.
Right.
And so if you get suffocated or this or that or the other, you don't make it very long. I mean, I don't even know if I know the exact statistic of it, but it's minutes. It's not a long time. We're not talking 30 minutes or an hour. We're talking maybe at the most 7 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes. So as you can imagine, this is a life critical or a life need. Okay, Laura, here's a did you know?
Okay.
All right. So if you breathe through the right side of your nose, so if you close the left side and just breathe through the right side,
All right.
it actually activates blood circulation and helps with logical thinking.
Okay.
Okay?
So let me think. So being the geek that I am, I think, okay, breathing through the right is stimulating the left hemisphere of your brain. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
So it's just the opposite.
Uh-huh.
And on the left side, if you close the right side and only breathe through the left side, you can lower your blood pressure almost instantly, decrease anxiety, and activate the creative and abstract thinking parts of your brain just by breathing either side.
So if I want to be more creative, I'm going to go ahead and breathe through my left nostril and become more activated in the creative side of my brain. I didn't know
Is
that.
that not amazing?
I love
So
that.
obviously we all think about breathing through both sides. And in a normal world, you're not going to sit around all day long and close one side versus the other.
Well, you could.
But it is a little hack. It's a little life hack that you can think about.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different techniques because we realized that the way life and jobs have kind of become, we have all gotten to the point where we actually are all taking less deep breaths and breathe faster, almost more like panting, like a dog does. Okay. But what we need to all be doing is taking longer, slower, deeper breaths. And that alone, the science alone in that is so huge. And we want to take those deeper, longer, deeper breaths in and out so that we also can allow our body not just to get in the oxygen, okay, take in the intake of oxygen, but we also want to be able to push out enough of the carbon dioxide in our bodies. And carbon dioxide is definitely not good for our bodies, right?
Right.
But if we do that slow kind of panting breaths, then we don't release enough of the carbon dioxide. So we're actually hurting ourselves and our brain by keeping too much of that internally.
And with carbon dioxide, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was thinking about if we're not expiring, exhaling that carbon dioxide, and you're doing that shorter breaths or you're holding your breath, I also know that the body becomes more acidic. Correct. Right? Were you already going to mention that?
No, that's perfect.
That if your body becomes more acidic, then it's more deleterious to your health. Your health will suffer. We are designed as human beings to be in more of that neutral, a little bit more alkaline state, but not too alkaline. Because that's just the nature of what we are. And if you are too acidic, which happens under stress, which we'll be talking about this in another episode about other parts of the body, but the breathing and breathing deeply, like you're talking about, can help you be a healthier human being mentally and physically. So this is a topic that, like I even said at the beginning, that people don't really think about. You just get into the habit of, if you're not breathing deeply, right? Those little short breaths or whatever. It could be you learn to breathe from your stressed out mom or dad, and you think that that's a normal thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or it can be an actual physical obstruction. So in the nasal cavity itself, we have, it's kind of like a little maze up in there, believe it or not. And there's these areas called turbinates that sit in, and the air kind of goes around them. And why are they there? Why is it not just two open, clearly open channels so that breathing can take place? Well, those turbinates actually humidify and filter what we breathe in. And we need that these days.
You're talking about in the nose.
I'm talking about inside the nose. However, if you do not breathe properly through your nose and enough through your nose, and you become more of a mouth breather, then guess what happens? Those turbinates actually get larger because they're getting unutilized. It's opposite of kind of what you would think. So for those of us who have had deviated septums, which is kind of makes it hard, that maze gets harder because the nose has been deviated to breathe. If we stop breathing through our nose as much and start breathing through our mouth more, our turbinates actually get larger, and it only makes it harder to breathe. So by practicing breathing, again, seems a really strange concept because you're like, I can just breathe naturally. I don't have to think about it. But when you do kind of practice to breathe more through your nose and not through your mouth, you'll actually do a better, more efficient job at it. You will get oxygenated more. You will have less carbon dioxide. I mean, all these wonderful health benefits.
And also, you're not getting the you said it's like when the air goes through the nasal passage. What was that word again? The turbinates. The turbinates. It's going through the turbinates. It's humidifying the air as well as filtering the air. And if you're breathing through your mouth, is it being filtered? No.
Not at all.
Is it being humidified? No, not at all. So just even thinking about that, it's like, oh, I'm breathing through my mouth. It's not filtered and then I'm bringing stuff into my body I really shouldn't.
And 'tis the season coming for allergies and for seasonal allergies. The fall is always, I've been practicing dentistry for many years in Frisco, and this is a season that we see a lot of upper respiratory infections. So one of the other things is that if you are not breathing through your nose properly, you will tend to be and have more upper respiratory infections, more sinus infections, more allergies, and things like that. So this is really more critical and an easier fix than most people think. And you can start even with your kids to teach them how to breathe differently. If you watch your kids breathe and they're always breathing out of their mouth, this is really, as a parent, something that you need to hone in on and really start practicing something different, because they are still at an age that it can change, and they're still at an age that when they start to breathe properly, their face and their arch and their palates will actually expand more and less orthodontics, things like that. Okay, so it's more than you can ever imagine. And I think we've laughed about this the other day when we decided to talk about this topic, is you were like, well, the yogis actually had it right all these years ago.
Yes, because yogic breathing, and part of the yogic breathing is they have you hold one of your nostrils closed, have you breathe in and out for a series of breaths, and then you do the other. That it's alternate nose breathing, or I forgot what they call it exactly, but
box breathing.
Yeah, yes, and it makes sense because yoga is not just about the body; it's about the mind, and it makes such perfect sense to do
And if
that.
we think that our kids aren't being stressed out at school and holding their breaths and breathing strange at different times, I mean, you're wrong. They are. And so this is something in our home, in our Morning Good Stuff, which we've talked about. This is one of our essential things that we ask the girls to practice on at least a couple of times a week. They're very athletic young ladies, playing volleyball, track, all those kinds of different things. And we need them to be breathing properly so that in the middle of them doing their athletic events, that they're actually getting all the benefits that they can from breathing.
The quality of breath, the quality of the oxygen that they're bringing in.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful thing. And just to mention, again, we did a show called the Morning Good Stuff. You have to go back and listen to that or watch that show on YouTube, because Dr. Jill and her husband are doing this amazing thing with their blended family with the kids and creating this routine. And I love that idea about with the kids, not only are you going to teach them, let's teach them how to properly chew their food and eat, right? Well, how about the breath and the breathing and why it would make them better at their sport?
Exactly. And especially if you have some children, which I believe we've talked about with kids and sleep. If kids are not getting the proper amount of sleep and or the proper quality of sleep, they can actually have ADD-like symptoms, ADHD-like symptoms in school settings, not because they actually have it, but because they're so exhausted and their brain is so tired and so unoxygenated that they have symptoms that appear the same. So I don't care how old your kids are. I don't care how old you are, any stage of life. We can all get better at our breathing quality and technique, and it just takes practice. So I don't care how heavy you are. I don't care if you just had a knee replacement and you can't exercise. I don't care what the excuse is. Every single one of us is sitting somewhere, either laying in our bed or sitting on a couch or a chair. And guess what? you can practice breathing, period. There's no excuses. There's no excuses for not being able to practice how to breathe properly.
I'm going to practice breathing right now. What should I do?
I mean, I think the simplest way is kind of a box breathing technique, and as simple can be. Now, James Nestor talks about several different ways in the book, and that's why I think it's one of the best books to have at home. But even just simply doing what we said a little while ago, breathing in and out and in and out about twice on each nostril and then on the other side.
Okay.
Something as simple as that, doing it slow, setting up, really trying to breathe from your diaphragm.
Like filling your lungs
Filling
at
your
the
lungs
base
at
of
the
your ribs.
base of your ribs.
Yeah.
Where most of us that get into that shallow, more panting breath kind of technique, it's much more of a upper lung kind of breathing. That is not as good as really getting solid and coming down. If you can get your breaths down to about 8 per minute, that's when you've really got some good quality, healthy breathing.
So, and I think what's helpful too is like if you put your hands, your fingers on your ribs and you breathe in and feel the expansion of your ribs. Like I'll do it right now. I can feel the expansion. I know that I'm bringing breath to the bottom, to the full bottom of my lungs, and then exhale.
Yes.
Like I also had heard of for stress relief to do something called, I know there's all sorts. He might even mention it in here, like the 7 breath technique, which is where for the count of 7 you breathe in for 7. You hold it, you exhale, and you do that 7 times. And it's kind of like, I bet, and I want to get this book and have it.
No, it's in there.
That will reset my brain and help me to be less stressed and less anxious.
Absolutely.
I actually, I have one of my 3 adult kids has a little bit more trouble with anxiety. And I've had him do this quite often. I'll say, remember the 7 breath, just take that deep breath in, Baron, and exhale. And it's so helpful because under stress, a lot of people don't breathe. Also,
true.
and in one of the other shows when we talked about snoring, one of our earlier shows, our episodes, I should say, I revealed that as I got older, I started having this gastrointestinal stuff and it was sort of a mystery. What it was. I went to the doctor, forgot what their gastroenterologist, and I'm not a big fan of a lot of medicines and all that stuff. And I really dove down. I'm like, what could be the cause of this? Because I eat really well and my degree is nutrition and I'm aware, but what was happening was when I was sleeping and breathing through my mouth as I had gotten older. I don't know why, maybe the muscles in my jaws got more lax. I don't know. And so I researched and found that for me, using mouth tape, so where I would, which I don't have occlusions in my nose, I can breathe through my nose fine. But when I use the mouth tape, it has forced me to sleep where I'm breathing through my nose, unless I'm sick and, I can't. And that's turns out to be such a great thing.
It is.
Right? So I'm going to be less stressed. I'm going to be more fully oxygenated. I'm going to be a little more alert and that type of thing. Right? So
Absolutely.
I mean, my gosh, I couldn't even believe that was my own little discovery about what was happening for me.
Mouth tape is amazing. There's still, as people are kind of starting this process, it can be a little uncomfortable in the sense that, oh my gosh, I'm trying to breathe through my nose, but I don't feel like I can breathe through my nose. You feel a little suffocated. Let's just use that word.
Okay.
And so that can create a lot of anxiety for you. So practicing when you're awake is certainly great to help even at night before you even get to the point where you start to use your mouth tape. And then there's also the nasal strips. You've all seen those on commercials. They have some value for some people. And then we also have little devices that can be slid up into the nose that almost look like little, like Mickey Mouse ears.
Oh, okay.
That kind of help to support the nostrils themselves to be open. Because at this point, most people are not going to know if they have a deviated septum or if they have some type of bone spur or something in their nose that really is obstructing them, or their adenoids or tonsils, right? So when we're talking to the general public out here, then I want to give you little tips and tricks of those kind of nasal supports to get started. And then You can also look for, in the dental world, for your dentist or for a dentist in the area to have a cone beam, which is a 3-dimensional x-ray unit that can take an x-ray of this part of your face, head and nose, this upper area.
Okay.
And yes, we look at it for teeth, of course, but we can also look at it on the physical items going on in the nose and be able to see and tell you if you do have a deviated septum or some type of dental spur or something that's really obstructing your nose. But if you're not sure if your nose is obstructed, and I don't even know if I can do it right now because I actually had a little bit of allergies this week, then when you're breathing and you have one finger on the side of your nose, you don't have to push too hard, just a little bit, and you take a good deep breath in and out, in and out, closing your lips, of course. If you can't do 2 breaths in and out on one side without almost immediately feeling like you need to pop open your mouth and take a breath, you have a serious obstruction up there. So try yourself out, check out the kids, make sure somebody doesn't have something really obstructive up in there where they really can't breathe. That's when it's time to go to the ENT specialist, ears, nose, throat specialist, and get that looked at. And just remember, you don't have to have remembered that you broke your nose to have a deviated septum. You can have a deviated septum from birth. If you had a long birth, if you were in the birth canal for a long period of time, if the natural birth was really long and forceful, that septum can actually get deviated from birth.
And I have not ever thought of about that before. I've thought about, how it can impact the shape of your head, being in the birth canal too long or whatever else. But that is so interesting. It really is. So I just also want to mention, you had mentioned wellness dentistry, and one of the things that you're talking about breathing, because this is very, very important. But part of what you do with your practice, which is in Frisco, Texas, outside of Dallas, is that you like to approach your patients, your general and cosmetic dentistry patients, with this wellness approach. You really want your patients to be really healthy, top to bottom, right? Mentally, physically, and all that. And so what a beautiful thing to go to you and you get to say, okay, well, let's talk about your breath. Let's talk about this. And, let's take a look at your nose. And we've got this cone beam that we can take a look. And did you know? And really helping improve the quality of people's lives, which, I'm passionate. And that's why I love being here with you to talk about these wellness topics. And breath and breathing is
huge part of
it.
It is.
About being alive. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most underrated concepts of what we think about and what people don't understand is it is a slow deterioration of their health when the actual root cause is the breathing itself. They don't realize it because they can still breathe. They're just not breathing properly. And then this dis-ease that kind of begins starts to get talked about at the doctor's office of, I have a lot of anxiety, I can't concentrate anymore, all these kinds of things. That is true. That's their symptom. That is not their root cause. So people can get on anxiety medicines and depression medicines and all these different things, when in actuality, if we just step back and look at the only couple of root causes that we can be talking about, one, how to breathe, start training people how to breathe, ask them to practice at home and help support that part of them for a little while, may not need the medicines in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty cheap alternative.
It
right?
is.
It's like free.
It's free and everybody can do it and nobody has an excuse, right?
Yes.
So, I love it. I love talking about breathing. One of my main things that I'm always telling my patients, if they've heard it once, they've heard it 1,000 times with me. One, because I don't want their teeth touching all the time, because that's just not the way that we were designed, but also because I want them to keep their mouth shut so that I know that they're breathing through their nose. So I always say, lips together, teeth separated. I say that to people all the time. So that's what I'll leave everybody with today is lips together, teeth separated. And so once again, Laura, thank you for being on the show today where we just really talked about the breathing and the how-to instead of just the unconscious amount that we think we're breathing just fine all the time.
Right. Great info as usual.
Thank you.
Also, to help us grow and expand our reach, be sure to like and subscribe to this show on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever you prefer. Just remember, it's time to live your legacy now. I'm Dr. Jill Wade, and this has been the Beyond Face Values Show. Until next time.